Center Professional Development Fellow, which JJ Brotton is one of those. So we are very excited today to have one of our fellows from last year to come and to present this year on engaging our students inside and outside of our classes, which is always a very important topic. I'm so excited for JJ to share her thoughts with us, and apparently wants to hear our thoughts as well. So JJ, without further ado, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for contributing to our series.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. First of all, I'm just so excited to be here. I need you to know as we get started that I am not an expert on this, but I have spent a little bit of time in the classroom. I've had a couple of students through the years, as a matter of fact, to quell my nervousness right before I jumped on here today. I added up my students at K-State, and so far I've had about 3,800 students in the 6 years that I've been at K-State. So I've had a couple of students. I typically teach large classes. I teach intro to marketing in the College of Business, and I'm going to go ahead and just share my little presentation with you so you can see my info here. So the reason I chose this topic is because I am just like you. One of those people that I would rather my students not fall asleep in my classroom, right? I would rather they want to be there, that they don't feel like it's drudgery to be there, that kind of thing. And so what I'm going to share today are just tips and tricks that are working for me and have worked for me in the past in my time here. I do want you to know that my background is not in higher ed. I actually started out, my undergrad was in music education, and I taught K through 6 right out of the gate. I spent 10 years in the pharmaceutical industry, and then when I came back to education, it was at the 2-year college level. So I taught at the technical college here in Manhattan for about 6 years before joining K-State about 6 years ago. Yes, I am very old, by the way, but with all that in there. So, but really what I want to share with you is just that I am not an expert on this, but these are some things that I have begged, borrowed, and stolen, one of those things through the years as I've gone along. And so one of the things I want to share with you is my philosophy of student engagement, because it might not be what you're thinking as you come in here. The first thing I want you to know is, from the student perspective, I think students engage in our classes when they feel known, when they feel cared for. And so a lot of the things you're going to hear today are around that no matter your content area, I mean, I teach marketing, but students will learn from you no matter what you're teaching. If you engage them, if you show them that you care, they actually want to be in your classroom and will do things around that. The other part of my philosophy is, as professors and instructors at K-State, we are ambassadors for the university. And so these things that I do, they're to draw people into this experience and want to feel like K-State is the best thing ever when they leave. And so that, I think, telling them why it's great. As marketers, one of the things we talk about is product positioning. And one of the things you do with positioning is you tell people how you want them to feel about your product. Well, my product is my class. And so I want to tell them, this is the best class ever. I'm so glad that you're here to join me. And so, and same thing about K-State. One of the first few things I do on the first few days of classes is I have them raise their hand if they're a transfer student, if they're brand new to campus, if they changed their major this year, those kinds of things, and just say, hey, welcome. It's worth it to be here. I'm so glad that you're here. Moving on, then, we're going to talk a little bit today about professional development. And the reason I want to talk about that is because all the stuff you're going to hear from me is stuff I've stolen from somebody else, you guys, by going to professional development. The Teaching and Learning Center here at K-State does such an amazing job of putting these things together. And I'll try to identify things that I talk about today that I've borrowed from other presenters that I've heard. And so, as Dawn mentioned, last year I participated in a lot of these to become a TLC fellow, which I'm so excited to be a part of. But I've also been a part of the peer review of teaching here at K-State. If you haven't looked into that, it's totally worth it. You get partnered with someone from a different college, usually, to be your peer mentor. And then you have a mentor over both of you that will help guide you through the semester. And it was an absolutely fabulous experience for me. And I learned so much through that. And so Ida and Sarah, I miss our interactions. And then I just want to give a quick plug for professional development with the Teaching Professor Conference. This is one I've gone to for a few times during my time at K-State, and I have learned so much. I'll post a link or have them put it on the video or something like that, but it's just called the Teaching Professor Conference. And I've learned a lot from that. You'll learn the active learning strategies, you learn about big classrooms, you learn about having GTAs and all kinds of interesting stuff there. And so all kinds of things that you can learn about. We'll talk about engagement soon, but before I finish this slide, I just want to say, be prepared to share your good stuff. As I talk about things today, you're going to be thinking, oh, I do something kind of like that. And so be prepared. Toward the end of the talk today, I'll have you share some of those things. So let's start inside the classroom. First thing, greet your students. Duh, right? Come on now. But you know what? I've actually watched some folks who go in there and they're so busy getting their classroom set up that they don't actually even look at their students. Folks, you're setting the tone for your classroom when you greet your students. One of my favorite things to do, and I'm not sure, I gotta be honest, how I'm gonna do this during when we come back to campus. I've been off campus since COVID started. Is I love to stand at the doorway and shake everybody's hand on the first day of class. Introduce myself to them. Now, I won't come close to remembering their names, just so you know at this point. I will get them later, but just greet your students. Walk around, say hello when they're coming in the room. It changes the atmosphere of the room simply by how you start with that day. The other piece of this, though, that I want to put out there is you have to be ready for your day, right? You can't walk in and trying to put your lecture together and all that kind of stuff. So being prepared is also an important piece of being able to greet your students. The next one, get to know their names. Now, I know everybody has different philosophies on this. Everybody has different classrooms, that kind of stuff. I teach in classes about 80 students apiece, and I usually have 4 of those a semester. So I'm ranging between 300 and 350 students a semester. This is not an easy task for me, folks. I want you to know I am a name person, but I spend hours studying that photo roster that you can print out from cases so I can get to know their names. And then whenever I have students working in groups or they're taking a test, I am walking around with that photo roster, putting names to faces and things like that. I also have them use name tents for the first few weeks of the semester, so I can add that in there. And that really helps me as well. But I think this is one of those things that helps people know you care, right? When I look at my T-Vals, a lot of times I get a comment that says, this is the only professor at K-State that knows my name. That hurts my heart, right? We want everybody to feel known. And part of that engagement is knowing their name. And so not only should you learn them, but then show them that you know them. We're going to talk a little bit about chatting with our students. I do this about 7 chapters in. I have an activity where students have to walk down to the front of the classroom, and while they're doing that, they're doing a little activity. I just go through and say their names and just show them that I know their names. And if they don't choose to participate in the activity, I walk around and say, hey, you're so-and-so, you're so-and-so. And guess what? I mess up. And then I use little goofy games. I'm like, okay, tell me your initials, and things like that, just to try to figure out how to let them know that I know who they are. And you're going to hear in the future when I talk about outside the classroom, how I use some of that name technique to help me still engage students when they're not in the classroom. I also, along with this, I had students give me note cards with information right at the beginning of the semester. I know a lot of people do a lot of different things like that, but for me, as I'm learning their names, a lot of times I'll just alphabetize their note cards. And so I'll put their note card next to their names. I'm learning them and just learn a little bit about them. But I also find that's really, really helpful for when a student wants to have a meeting with me. I can go take a look at their note card ahead of time and say, well, tell me about this activity you're doing outside of class or something like that. So I have a little bit of background knowledge instead of walking in blind to that conversation. I see some stuff going on in the chat here. I'm just going to double check, make sure I need to see anything. Yes, Andy, I totally agree with the note cards. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the different techniques. And here's the deal, not everything works for everybody when we're talking about the active learning and all that kind of stuff. So I challenge you today to find a few nuggets and take those and try them. And that's what I do when I listen to any of these presentations, when I go to professional development. So hopefully you can find a few nuggets of truth in what we talk about today. The next one is feedback. When I was in the peer review of teaching, one of my colleagues, Kristen Malik over in the hospitality department, said, you should have a mid-semester survey. And I was like, oh my gosh, asking for feedback in the middle of the semester. What if they hate me? You know, and I was just like, I was so worried about it. But I tried it, and guess what? It was the best thing ever. My T-vals shot through the roof as a result of this, because I asked their feedback on a couple different things, and I'll explain that. I simply asked them, share 3 things that I can't change that you wish could be changed. And then I have them share 3 things that they think I can change that they wish could be changed. And, you know, the things they can't change, it was great, you know, parking. Well, yeah, me too. Do you know I have to park out there too? And I can't find a spot either. And so it helped us find some common ground with some of those things. But then, you know, some of them were simple things like the temperature of the classroom. Well, guess what? I work in the business building. I can actually change the temperature of my classroom, right? So there were some things that I could make immediate changes for. And then there were some things that I had actually planned to make changes for that as a result of their feedback, I made changes. One of those is due times for homework. I start the semester and I have their homework due at 3 o'clock on Friday so that if they have questions, they can ask me. Well, as you can imagine, 3 o'clock on Friday is not the most popular time in the world to have homework due. And so I change it usually as a result of their feedback. They wish their homework could be due later in the day and later in the weekend as a result of this survey. So I share the results of the survey after they've taken it, and I share the changes that we're going to make as a result of their feedback. And that has been a huge thing for me. So thanks to Kristen Malik for sharing that particular thing. I think that's it on that one. Okay. Moving on, chat with your students. I know, again, that seems like a no-brainer, but get to know them, right? Use their note cards, walk around before class, after class, in the hallway, at Walmart, you know, at So Long Saloon. Talk with your students. Here's the thing. They want to know you as their professor, and they always wonder if you actually know who they are, right? So you have to tell them, right? Don't ever make them wonder if you realize that they're your student, right? If you recognize somebody who even looks remotely similar to somebody who's in your class, all you have to say is, weren't you in my class? And then they're like, yeah, I was in there, and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, oh yeah, of course I remember. Maybe not always, but you say that, right? Because again, you're an ambassador for K-State. You want them to feel known and catch up with them on all of those things. So during COVID, I've done video intros where I had them record just a little video intro, and then I responded to everyone. This semester, I'm at 350 students. It took me 3 weeks to work through all of those video intros, but it's worth it, right? Be careful about the things that you want to spend your time on. For me, that was something I really wanted to spend my time on. I also, along with this one, when I'm in the classroom, I give my students extra credit for coming to my office to meet me. If they stop by and meet me, they get 15 extra credit points, which is basically a free homework assignment in my class. Number one, they get to meet me and talk to me individually. But number two, they found my office, which can be a challenge in the business building, and with our signage not always being so great in there. But number three, they've come to my office for a benign reason, right? So hopefully the next time they need something that may not be so so easy, they feel like they know me and can come in and come find me. So that's a thought for that one. I also want to just include your syllabus in this. When I did the peer review of teaching, we spent time working on our syllabus with our peer and our mentor, and they helped me craft some things in my syllabus that just really help students feel comfortable with the way things go. And also, if they have questions throughout the semester, then they can use that as a resource. Well, what's the late assignment policy, or what do I do if I miss an assignment? Those kinds of things. I put those right in my syllabus to help with those kinds of things, which I always thought, oh, it's really good for the students to have to come to me. But when we get to the numbers that I'm at, it can be really challenging to, get that question over and over. And so try to push students back to that resource. And it can also help in the rare case that you need a little bit of backup with an administrator or something like that, where you can say, well, I explained this to the student and it's in the syllabus and that kind of thing. So that can also be helpful there. All right, moving on. Get them out of their chairs. So this is where those active learning techniques come in. Use the note cards to ask students, a certain student to answer the question. I am a big fan of groups. And when I say groups, I don't just let them sit with the 6 people around them and talk about something. I actually assign groups. I use a random group generator that somebody had given me at one point in time. And I post them as they walk in the room. You need to sit in your groups today, and here's your groups. And so, group 1 is these 6 people, and group 2 is these 6 people. And then I put little number tents around the room. So this is where group 1 is going to sit. This is where group 2 sits. And what that does for me is that causes them to interact with somebody they might not have ever interacted with. And yes, I kind of realize it's a little mean to make them sit in groups that they might not know. But here's the thing. My very first semester at K-State, I had 3 lovely ladies that were exchange students from China. And so they only got to be here at K-State for a year, and they wanted to get the most out of their experience. So partway through the semester, they came to me and they said, can we not sit in a group with just the people around us? Can we interact with other people? And I said, well, sure, you can find another group. And they're like, no. I'm not comfortable doing that. But if you assign me to another group, then I have to talk to somebody else. And so I've had that philosophy since then. About 2/3 or 3/4 of the way of the semester, I assign groups, and then at the end of the semester, I'll let them choose their own groups. But it's been a fun way to get students out of their chair. And then a lot of times I'll have them move around the room. I have the luxury of having lovely whiteboards in my rooms. And so I'll have them a lot of times put their information on the whiteboard, and then we'll just make a train around the room, and we'll walk around and see what everybody else put. And then I'll have them have, a conversation. What did you see that you really liked or didn't like, or that kind of stuff. So whatever kind of active learning you can do to get them out of their seats, they're going to remember that, right? Because most of their college classrooms, they go, they sit, and they wait for the to be done, not the bell to ring, but wait to be done. Another favorite of mine, which I know they talk about in the class that Dawn and Tucker teach, is just the move to the side of the room if kind of thing. If you're kind of talking, about opinionated kind of things, move to this side of the room if you think this, or this side of the room if you think this. It can be kind of messy with 80 people, but I like messy, right? It's kind of fun to get them out of their classrooms. And for my specific subject matter, we talk about marketing segmentation. How do you group the people who you want to market toward? And so I'll do that. We're going to segment today by potato chip flavor. So find your group of those people who are closest to you that like a certain flavor of potato chip. And so they're all throughout the room, and there's the barbecue over here, and there's the plain over here. And undoubtedly what happens is we have 2, right, that end up on parts of the room that should be together. And I say, you know what, that happens in our industry as well. And here's how we deal with that. And so that can be anytime you can use an illustration to get them out of their chairs, it's a great thing. I'm seeing some stuff going on in the chat here, so I just want to see if there's anything I should comment on. Fun resources, that's good. Yeah, numbering works well for groups. I like that too. Yeah, I can definitely show share my random group generator. It's an Excel spreadsheet that somebody gave me, and basically all you do is paste all your students from your roster in one side, and then it pops them into groups on the other side. So yeah, I could definitely share that with you. All right, so get them out of their chairs if you possibly can. The next one I'm going to move on to is ask them what they know. As I said, I teach marketing. When we get to social media marketing, they know a heck of a lot more than I do. I'm sorry to say that. I know we're not supposed to admit that our students know more than we do, but they do. They do in terms of what they consume. They have access to new things that I don't see when I'm on Facebook, which is the old lady thing, right? And so ask them what they know. It's amazing how many of my students are running social media accounts for different organizations they're part of. And so the challenge, of course, anytime you ask for something like that, is it might get out of control. But guess what? You can just bring them back down. It's no biggie. It's no biggie. So just ask them what they know. You can learn so much from your students by asking them what they know and have to share about things. Oh man, I have something on my notes that I can't even read. So there you go. Isn't that fun when you get to do that? So be prepared for class. I know I talked about that just a little bit with greeting your students, but be prepared. One of the things that I get feedback a lot on my T-Vals is that I always walk into the classroom prepared. Well, I think it's shares tells the students that they're important enough for me to prepare for them, right? I usually have a little lesson plan. It's just a little listing of the things I want to make sure I cover. I have announcements figured out, things like that. But I think it just tells students that they matter, and this is what's important. I also have the activity prepared, if we're doing any activity or anything like that, so I don't have to sit there and go, oh, I meant to put you in groups, but you're already sitting there, so we'll just do it this way now. Make sure you're ready for whatever is coming up in your classroom, and we'll talk in just a little bit. For me, that includes a mid-lecture break. Connect them with resources. As you know, K-State is huge. We have so many different crazy resources that it's hard for students sometimes to navigate their way, and especially for those students that have transferred from a two-year college. They may come right in, sit in your classroom on the first day and not even know what Canvas is, right? So connect them with resources. I don't know if you guys saw at the beginning of this year, but the Student Success Center actually made a link that you can add to your Canvas page. And I've had students really enjoy that. The Student Success resources, then it talks to them about study skills and things like that and how they can be successful. And I always encourage students to go and set up an appointment with a coach over there if they have the opportunity to. In addition to resources like that, though, I let them know about stuff going on in the business department. I didn't mention, I don't just have business students. Students from across campus take my class. So I get some engineers, hospitality students, education students. I get students from all across campus because my class is an intro class. But I still let them know about stuff going on in the College of Business just because I want them to know things that are going on and to make the most of their college experience. So sharing that, when to meet with their advisors, how to meet with career folks, when is the career fair, all of those kinds of things I think are incredibly important. And I also let them share announcements about anything they have going on. So I get a lot of clubs that share announcements, as well as fraternities and sororities might have a philanthropy event, that kind of thing. In addition, I think it's really important to address what's going on in the world or in the area. So, for K-State, when it's homecoming week, I think it's important that we address, hey, it's homecoming week. How many of you are involved? What are you doing? Hey, Fake Patties is this weekend. Be smart, right? The one personality that I own in my classroom is the dorky mom personality, right? That's who I am, and so that's who I am in my classroom. And so they get a little lecture about St. Patty's Day in my classroom because that's who I am, because I do care about them. And I want them to have a good time, but I also want them to come back to my classroom on Monday. So I think those kinds of things can really just let them know you care, and you really want them to have a good college experience, and that you realize that stuff's going on outside the classroom, and that, it may be hard to get your homework done this week, so make sure you carve out extra space, that kind of thing. All right, I'm going to double check the chat and see if there's anything in there. Again, I need to be responding to.
JJ.
Campus can respond, create groups. That's good. Yeah, Sarah.
So there was a question in the chat that I was curious about too. When you have the students move around, how do you handle accessibility issues?
Oh, good question. I've only had that one semester where I had a visually impaired student that needed to stay in the front. And I just always assigned him to the group at the front and made the people around him move. So that's a great question. Yeah. Yes, career fair, those kinds of things I think are huge, huge, huge. So definitely know that. Be safe, have fun. I love that, Dawn. Absolutely. Yeah, we want you to have a good time, right? We want you to have a college experience, but we want you to be safe as well. All right, let them see you sweat. I think it's really important that students realize that we mess up, and that we realize we mess up, and that we own that we mess up. If you're having a bad day, I think it's okay to let them know you're having a bad day. I had an issue a couple of years ago where I had a child who I got called in the middle of class. She was sick and I needed to call somebody else to fix it. And, I just said, hey, you guys, I need to step out and I need to take care of this, and I'll be back as soon as I can. And I think it's okay. I shouldn't say I don't think it's okay. I think you should let students see you sweat. Sometimes life is hard, and they need to realize that, as professors, we have stuff going on outside the classroom. Life is busy. And so I think you need to let them see you sweat. That also goes with being genuine, right? Just letting them see who you really are. Timely content. Try to tie your subject into what's going on in the world, if you possibly can. In marketing, we use the Wall Street Journal in my class. We talked about toilet paper on Tuesday, right? There's always something you can tie into content that's going on in the world. And again, that helps engage your students. And lastly, for in the classroom, do a mid-lecture break. Now, I can't remember his name. I tried to look it up yesterday, but one of our wonderful presenters from a couple years ago when we were still live, he was in the ag reading area. I don't remember exactly, but he talked about a mid-lecture break. And I loved it because, gosh, we all get bored, right? We all have Zoom gloom. And so take a mid-lecture break like we're going to do right now. I'm not sharing the red screen, am I? This is fun. So in my classroom,
this Oceanside Verbo is about to become the back.
It's really fun to use a commercial for a mid-lecture break, right? So whatever you can do, whether it's a commercial, whether it's a joke, whether it's whatever, put it in your lecture, put it in your slides so you won't forget to do it. If I don't put it in, I forget, right? And just stop and do something. A lot of times I'll let them stand up or whatever, but that mid-lecture break is such a nice little break in the stuff that's going on. Anything in the chat I should be aware of? Anything we need to address? Yeah, the break of the beach would be nice. I like that too. You could just put up a picture of the beach, right? And let them zone out for a minute. I like that idea. All right, so moving on, let's talk about outside the classroom. Now, I know these things are kind of funny, but again, when we think about being ambassadors for K-State, I think outside the classroom is just as important as what we do in the classroom. So for me, after exams, again, I learned this at one of those teaching professor conferences. I can't talk to every student with 350 students about their exam scores. But what I do is I email about the top 10 and about the bottom 10 and say, hey, good job, really appreciate your hard work, and the low scores say, I bet that didn't go exactly how you wanted to. If you want to chat with me about how to improve in the future, stop by, send me an email, that kind of stuff. So email those high and low scores, especially if you have a big class. Respond to emails about them. We get all kinds of emails from Student Life about what's going on with our students. I always then forward that to the students, say, hey, I want you to know that I know what's going on. How can I help? You know, do we need to meet? Do we need to change due dates? But let the student know that you got that email and what should you do about it together. One of the things I like to put in my information is just, you know, let's figure out a solution together. Because you know, a lot of times students think when, you know, a family member dies or they, you know, they break their leg or whatever, that we don't care. Well, that's not the case, but it's really helpful, I think, to know that we want to work through things together. Moving on, say hello always. So I mentioned earlier, you know, chat with your students, but when you run into them in the hallway or you run into them at Applebee's or wherever, don't ever let them wonder if you know who they are, right? Just say, hey, weren't you in my class? And then they'll be like, oh yeah, I was in there spring of 2016, blah, blah, blah. I'm a manager of the restaurant now. This happened to me on Friday at Rockin' K's. The manager of the restaurant at Rockin' K's was in my class, my very first semester of spring of 2016, you know? And so it just, again, gives us that chance to continue to be an ambassador no matter where we are. But if you even have an inkling that that person you see might have been in your class, make sure you say something. Let's see. Moving on. LinkedIn. Great way to stay connected once students are out of your classroom, and a great way to continue to be that ambassador. You know, when I see a student get a new job, I send them a quick, you know, the little ones you can copy and paste or whatever in there, congrats on the new role or whatever. And undoubtedly, I get a nice little note back. And as a matter of fact, it's a nice little pick me up for me because, you know, students will say, oh, I loved your class. Thanks so much for reaching out. And it's just a great way to connect, but also to find like future speakers for your class or things like that. We have in the College of Business, we have a young alumni group. And so every now and then, because of somebody I've connected with there, I can connect them on there. Just so you know, by the way, I always let students connect with me. I will never reach out and do that from my side. I always tell them to connect with me if they want to, because if they don't want to be connected with me, that's totally cool. But if they do, they'll do it. Congratulate them. Because I know my students' names, I am always looking for them in the headlines, right? K-State Today is my favorite thing in the world. I will walk through that every chance I get to look for current students or former students. And when I see them, their name, just send them a quick email saying, hey, good job on that scholarship you got, or yay, you're on the homecoming committee, or former athletes. You know, I had 2 tennis students in my class a couple of years ago, and they were the ones that just did great and beat KU a couple of weeks ago. And so then they said, well, hey, you should come to our match, right? So they were really happy to hear about that. So I think just congratulate or reach out if you can anytime you hear about your students. The next one is harder to do. Go to events if and when you can, especially the ones that actually matter to your students. So every now and then you're going to get that rare student that says, hey, you should come to my XYZ. In the case of those tennis students, they said, you should come to our match. Well, you know what, guys, I went to their match and there were only like 6 people there watching. It was impactful that I went to watch their match. I went to watch a volleyball match the first time I had a volleyball student, and wow, college volleyball is fun, right? And so I had a blast, you know, specifically if they ask and you can, why not, right? That strengthens that bond. And then when they're in your classroom, they're going to pay that much more attention to your content because of that information. Let's see what else. Oh, graduation. Graduation may not be a huge deal because they may not actually get to see you, but if your college does like a graduation breakfast or something, that can be a huge way to get to know your students, and again, show how much you care about them just by showing up. I know this one sounds weird, but if you're going to post office hours, you should actually be in your office. And if you're not going to be, leave a little note on the door, let students know you're going to be gone or something like that. But, you know, actually be available when you say you're going to be available, and try to be available more than you say you're going to be available. Because of this, students know that I always just, if my door's unlocked, meaning it's sitting against the latch because it's always cold, I don't usually open it all the way up, that they're welcome to stop in. I let them know, I tell them that like every classroom for about the first month. And so a few semesters ago, there was actually an emergency. A student like passed out in the middle of the hallway, kind of out in the breezeway of the business building. But the bottom line is the student knew I was usually in my office and usually available. And so she came and found me, and I was able to contact 911 and help that student. And so students know, they pay attention when you're around and available. So if you're going to tell them you're available, try to be available. Other times to meet with them. When you teach, especially a large class, there's always a group of students that wants to chat with you more. So one of the things I got from that teaching professor conference I went to was set up times for them to do that. I've done this during COVID, and it's been really pretty fun. I started the first semester with coffee with the prof. So when we were completely on Zoom, they could sign up to just have another chance to meet with me outside of any scheduled classroom stuff. And we would just chat, right, with our coffee about whatever they wanted to talk about and hang out. Again, not huge numbers, right? You don't want huge numbers when you do something like that, but have them sign up and then provide a link. Now that things have eased up a little bit, but I'm still online, we've been doing lunch with the prof. And so everybody grabs their lunch and we go into a conference room at the business building and just chat. You know, we talk a little bit about class, you know, whatever questions they have, but then we go and talk about whatever. Last time we ended up talking about movies a lot and things like that. And so, you know, another way to let them know you care, so that then they will care once they're inside of your classroom. Let's see. And lastly, the good old letters of rec, right? Again, when you know your students, you know their names, you can actually offer, which I know it's scary to offer this, right? To be that reference or to be that letter of recommendation. Folks, I get students from all across campus that take me up on this because they just don't feel like anybody else knows their name. So again, if you know their name, you can do things like that for them, you know, and believe me, writing letters of rec is not my favorite thing in the world to do. But I think it's important, right? It shows students again that we care and we know them. I always have them send me a resume when I do so, and have a little blurb in the basically form letter that I use, that I always change out for each student. So that's that. So how about the chat? Anything in there that I need to address? I see some good stuff going on there. Calendly says to book the like the lunch with the prof or stuff like that stuff. That's a good idea. Student hours instead of office hours. Melissa, I think I was at that one. I remember that. That's really good. Yes. All right. So that is it for the inside and out of the classroom presentation. So this is your chance to shine. I'm going to actually turn off my thing. There's my contact information. I would love to chat with you, by the way. I'm kind of passionate about this teaching stuff. And so because that's my whole job, I would love to chat with you. Email me, connect with me. We can do coffee, we can do a Zoom, whatever. So I'm going to stop this and I'm going to just let you jump out if anybody has anything you'd like to share about stuff you're doing that's working really well.
JJ, I want to jump in and say that number one, I love all the very practical advice that you're giving us. Sometimes, get advice that's not going to work for all of us, and I think the advice you gave works across discipline and works classes. It's wonderful. There's one question in the chat that I think we missed that I do think is important because I've run up against this issue myself. Is have you got into a situation in which someone has asked you to write a letter of rec and you're not comfortable recommending them?
Absolutely.
And how do you deal with that situation?
Well, it's not fun, right? But however you've captured their data. Usually for me, it's simply grades, right? And I go back and say, it's kind of hard to get a D in my class, Sam, and you did. And so it's really not appropriate for me to write a letter of recommendation. Or I've also heard a thought of, you can just ask them, well, what would you want me to write? And then they say, well, blah, 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 and you're like, well, wait a minute, is that accurate? And so just depending on the kind of conversation, but yeah, I've absolutely had that situation.
If the student presses, because I've had this situation, and says, yeah, I still want that lukewarm to negative letter, do you write it?
Yeah, I'll write it, but I'll write it factually, right? This student was a student in my class. That's about it, right? I mean, there's really not a lot of other stuff that goes in there. Usually I talk about their work ethic and, their punctuality, those kinds of things. But, if you can't, you can't.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Anybody else? What are some things you're doing? I just spilled. Isn't that fun, right? In front of everybody. That's what I talk about being human. Let them see you sweat, right? I would tell my class, I just spilled in the middle of class. Lovely.
So there's some awesome ideas in the chat. Rebecca said she watched Professor yesterday greet every student who signed into Zoom.
Nice.
And said it was an interesting way to acknowledge the presence of students and took very little time. So kind of the Zoom analogy to talking to them before class is something we can do over Zoom as well. Jason says he often talks with students when they ask and always guides them to really consider who they ask to write letters, as these can be very important. So kind of back to that letter of recommendation question, thinking about what letter you're going to get intentionally and proactively when you're doing that. And then there's some questions about how to help students with emails that are not business-like. Tucker's actually going to drop in the chat. This may be a helpful resource for any of you who have students who don't write emails in a way that maybe you would prefer. There's a video that I have my students watch that actually tell them how to write an email. Because one of the things that I understand in my classes is I sometimes, and I think many of us sometimes, want to expect our students to know things we didn't teach them. So what I'll try to do is take a step back on everything that I'm expecting my students to do to make sure that something that we've talked about what my expectations are, so that they're not doing something that they think is completely fine, but is not going to work in my class. So we have an email etiquette video that we have our students watch that may be helpful for some of you. So just acknowledging those messages in the chat.
That's one thing that I think with emails, because it tends to be such a problem. And I hear so many other instructors and professors complaining about how their students email without really just complaining and not doing anything about it. And so I started, for a lot of my classes, I'll have students, one of their early assignments is I have in my syllabus how I want them to send emails, and that when they're working in a group that they should always, when they email me, CC all the other members of their group. And so I'll give them a little group project that they have to do, and they have to email something to me. And I'll say, and make sure you look at page 5 of the syllabus and that you follow all the instructions of how to send an email. And so that then, it's kind of reinforcing that not only do I explain how you should do it, but then I have them do it as part of an assignment.
Yeah. I agree. I've also included just a PowerPoint presentation from our intro to business class that they use about writing that. And I always just plunk it at the bottom of my Canvas page, and say, if you're having trouble figuring this out, here's a document to help you, because some people just don't know.
Back to
sorry, Don. I've also had good luck asking students to email me and to choose a second instructor to email and CC me on it so that it connects them with another person at the university and gives them more practice with email. And I think that's great because then they can either introduce themselves or ask a question. And no, this is not just an assignment. And then I tell them, your other email assignment. So you need to treat it like a real email. And so I think that's been effective as well.
Good one.
So for other engagement strategies, Jen has a very great suggestion, says that they start class with a quote that is relevant to the lesson and where they are in the semester, and have students read the quotes and interpret what they think it means and how it relates to the class. One of the things I really like about that suggestion, Jen, is that their interpretations and connections might be better than mine. And I think letting students make connections, someone who told me that's the definition of critical thinking, is allowing students to make connections. So I love that idea.
I also love using jokes and sprinkling jokes through, especially if I can find ones that are relevant to like whatever the class is. In my bilingualism class yesterday, we were talking about Spanish and English in contact. And so I started the class with this meme that's like, I always say the word mucho around my Spanish speaking friends. Why? Because it means a lot to them. Right. And so like, you know, starting the class off light with something funny that's also relevant to like, look, we're talking about Spanish and English in contact, and now let's get into the topic. So I think that it kind of opens up students to relax and get engaged.
And I think that that's also just important in your genuine nature, right? I am not a joke teller, so I can't do that, but I try to do other goofy things, you know, and just try to figure out how to be me and not boring me, right?
I mean, I do a lot of dad jokes. And my students know I have kids. I talk about that on the first day of class. But I think the other thing is, and I catch myself in puns and laugh at them. And my students go, oh, but they like that. Yeah. I think it's and I tell this to new professors too, is before you start doing that, you need to make sure you're comfortable with yourself in the classroom. Because that's what's so important. Do what's comfortable for you. And if you're not comfortable, stray away from it. It will seem unnatural.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if you're good about making fun of, I'm perfectly fine making fun of myself too. And so I don't have a problem with that, but I know there's people that aren't that way. And so humor can be a really strong tool. It can also work backwards as well. So just, yeah, and making it personal, but being careful.
I'm not good at jokes, but I tell you what, I'm good at finding comedy and comics that work, that can be up on the screen for some time. I know one of our faculty who taught history, which was a pretty intense course, McCharney would always have a commercial at the beginning of class. And he would let it run until all the students were in the room, because he was very, very strict about shutting the doors and not allowing anyone in after he started his lecture. But he would give them that preamble. He would also allow students, student organizations to do their announcements before he started. And it gave other faculty who were not teaching at that time a way to have their students mention things that are going on in the college to encourage the students to attend. So those are other options.
Yeah, I use that strategy of showing comedy and also just I teach sign language, so I also showed like some videos where they do some interpretation of music, you know, with ASL, just, you know, just before class, just something for them to see, not necessarily you know, go into depth about it or anything, but just as something you know, interesting to see or fun to hear.
I have found, since you brought it up, Natalie, that if you find the right video, it may have a question with it or give your students an opportunity for whatever the theme is that day. So what I try to do is find a video that deals with, for instance, political capital or whatever the subject is that's controversial, that gets us talking about it before I lecture on it. And that gets action going to say, okay, what do you think of this? Do you agree with this? Not agree with this? And it gets them into the conversation. And then they listen to a lecture that has one point of view from the book or what have you, and then we talk about it again. So I found that to be more interactive than just straight lecture.
Yeah, I have my favorite deaf drivers video that I like to show, and that usually leads to all kinds of questions. And as I'm getting into just teaching them about deaf culture, and that it does that very thing, like you said.
I've also had students kind of find videos, like we're even going to do this next week in class with concepts, applying business concepts to the real world. So I'm going to have them find clips, and then we're going to show them in class and talk about them, which helps me because sometimes I don't know the TV shows and movies they watch a lot, but they'll know them and it makes more sense to them. But also I always tell them, if you put in a clip, give me a recommendation of whether any of us should watch that TV show or movie if they liked it, just for fun, which especially last year when we went to lockdown, students really appreciated that because they were like, oh, good, I can look this up and go watch something on my free time too.
Something that I learned from the peer review teaching program when I went through it was the importance of having different ways for students to engage, because we always have those extrovert students that speak out in the classroom. So like that same handful, 5 students that always talk, but then there are other people who aren't comfortable speaking in the classroom. So having either something written that they can turn in, or I have found when we went remote, I did like a discussion, like reflection each week. So the students had to reflect on something, and I wasn't forcing them to discuss with one another like a typical discussion board, but they posted it there so they could read each other's if they wanted to. And then I interacted one-on-one with their reflections, and I got to see a lot more insights, I felt like, than I would have in the physical classroom when it would always be the same students who would speak up. I got to see insights from some of the quieter students, or different students would have different insights each week. So I think that's something, when I go back to the regular classroom, I'm going to keep that online reflection component as a way for them to engage that way.
One assignment that I've given before that I really like, that's not too complicated, easy to grade, and I think fun, is that I'll have students create a meme related to a topic that we're doing in class to like transfer the ideas that they're like complex ideas that we're talking about in class. And then like, how do you make them like simple and funny and direct in a meme? And you can really see like students get into it and really understand like, oh, okay, this is what this concept is, put it in a meme. And then like, they're really fun. Like we'll go through, like I had them do this the first time last year, and I just thought that like I would grade them and whatever, but they were all so funny and so good. So I spent the first 5 minutes of the next class going through and just like sharing what all the students came up with and talking about like how they were expressing their ideas. It was a really, really fun thing to do.
I would also add, that's where I get a lot of my mid-lecture breaks from, is I do an assignment where they have to share their favorite commercial. And then I use a lot of their favorite commercials for my mid-lecture breaks. And so sometimes you can give them a simple little assignment and grab stuff from that for your future classes too.
You were talking, JJ, about getting to know your students. Because I have a 3-hour studio 3 times a week. Before COVID, one of the things that I would do is tell them how much I like to eat in class. I'm a person who munches all during class. It's my energy feed. And so I tell them if they were going to bring in anything, they had to share it with me. And so I would go along and pick up something off their desk or whatever. And I said, because I'm not going to buy a whole bag of it. I just want to see what it tastes like, And they'd have a big kick out of what I liked and what I didn't like. It became this sort of community thing. And someone would say, well, I'm not bringing that in class. You've been eating too much of mine, but it became a way for us to kind of get to know each other. And I would share, like I would bake food and bring it in. And so we would have these exchanges. It's been difficult to do those kinds of things with COVID, but I can promise you they'll be resumed in the fall. So, yeah.
want to highlight a couple of other points in the chat that are really cool. Tiffany talks about how when students make contributions, how she'll give them a shout out to validate and acknowledge the contributions that they've made to their classes learning. Adam also mentioned that addressing the current events that are impacting our students and potentially providing barriers to their learning is important to acknowledge and to address in your class to the extent that we can. So I think these are other ways to really let our students know that we care about them.
And I'll just add to that. Since I work for the Diversity and Multicultural Student Affairs Department on campus, we're more than welcome, and it's like literally our job in this department to help you facilitate and do those acknowledgements in your classrooms. And kind of like what Sarah was saying, I guess it just depends on your class and your comfortability with the subject matter. And if you want that to be a discussion topic, or if you're just simply providing that recognition for then that conversation to happen outside of the class, like during our office hours or after class. We're just seeing a lot from our multicultural students and students from historically marginalized communities that's not being recognized, specifically our Asian American students, Pacific Islanders, with the rise of hate crimes, our students of color. We're not seeing, we all saw the Black at K-State hashtag. So addressing the things that are happening outside of the world and recognizing, our students don't just exist in our classroom. They're impacted on these larger systems. And so if we're giving address to that, we can make those accommodations. Hey, I know it's been a very difficult week. Like, I have been emotionally drained from the trial going on, having students reach out about it. Like, take a break. Like, I understand it, take a break. We have students who are from Minnesota. Tremaine Lindsay, who's in our department, is from the Twin Cities. So just opening that space up for your students so that they can also recognize that you're not seeing them just as a student, but you're seeing them on their cultural identities, their perceived identities, and you're really giving them the space to flourish as a student. But I'll also just note, I was part of JJ's first class at K-State. So everything she's saying is true, and she does everything, and she's just an awesome professor. So everything she said is accurate.
Adam, you are too kind. I like to think that my class has improved since that very first semester. If you guys think about it back to when you first started, I hope you feel like your class is way better than that very first semester. But it's been really fun to watch Adam grow and flourish since he was in my class. It's just a little, I don't know if you were a freshman or sophomore that year, but it was early on. Yeah. So it's been fun to watch Adam grow into his current role.
Yeah, I find that when I do current events, I don't have to worry about attendance, they come. But I also have them bring in the current events. I don't say what the current event has to be. They bring it in and we discuss on a marketing standpoint how these things affect business. So, and they love it. The other thing I do is the first day of class is my Ask Me Anything day. So they could get to know me and I get to know them. So, I call them, I said, give me your name, something about you, and then ask me anything. And I've been asked anything. One asked me, if you were a Disney princess, what would you be? I was like, Disney has princesses? Another time, somebody asked me, who did you vote for president? Before I could say anything, the class told him, shut up. She doesn't have to tell you that. And they would not let me answer. But yeah, I get to know them. They get to know me. And from then on, we move on from class. But it helps kind of take the pressure off the first day of class.
So we are
love having JJ in our faculty.
I would say we are just about out of time, and I want to thank JJ for having a very engaging discussion about engagement today. I really enjoyed learning her perspectives as well as the perspectives from all of you. Couple of announcements before we get finished. Next week, we're going to have a just-in-time conversation on mental health. Cody Walls from Housing Services is going to come and talk to us about how we can be helping our students and ourselves through these very trying and challenging times. So please be there for that. I'll also remind you the TLC Professional Development Series has a certificate as well as fellow status that can be bestowed upon you if you complete it. All of the details for that are available in our newsletters as well as on our website. And I would like to again thank our TLC fellow, JJ Brotton, for presenting today. So please join me in thanking JJ for a wonderful session.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. I really